Hello, I'm State Senator Alan Sanborn. Welcome to another edition of In Session with State Senator Alan Sanborn. Today's guest, I'm pleased and honored to be joined by former Macomb County Treasurer, former Secretary of State of the state of Michigan, and now our Congresswoman for the 10th District, Congresswoman Candice Miller. Welcome to the show. Good to have you.
Thanks, Senator. I'm delighted to join with you again.
Good to have you home. Are you on break right now?
Just for a day.
Just for a day. That's a quick break, and we're pleased that you've joined us.
It's good to be out of Washington for a day, back to normalcy where people are normal.
Although, yeah, it's good to have you home and good to see you back from Washington, but you've been in Lansing quite a bit lately. You've been working with us on the Real ID package, on my driver's license enhancement package. Tell us about Real ID and why it was necessary for us to do Real ID.
Well, as you say, I was in Lansing actually by your invitation, and so I appreciate that. You and I have worked very closely on this piece of state legislation, which really the impetus was at the federal level, where we were trying to have national standards for driver's licenses and state identification cards, and to make sure that we had secure cards, and to make sure that the type of documentation, the identification documentation that the various states are using, also had a high standard. In other words, we want to make sure that you are who you say you are. And of course, the unfortunate reality was on those horrific attacks on 9/11, we found that most of those terrorists actually had valid state driver's licenses. Fortunately, none from Michigan. Most of them were from Florida, but they could have been from Michigan, because Michigan was one of a handful of states that was giving out driver's licenses and state ID cards to known illegal aliens. Something I tried to change when I was the Secretary of State. Again, you and I worked on that. We just couldn't get it over the hurdle there, but subsequently, because of the recommendation of the 9/11 Commission, this piece of legislation did pass the Congress, and now all of the states have been in compliance, and again, Michigan principally in compliance because of the push that you gave it. And so I was up there testifying before your committee about it, and I was pleased to see the legislature did go along with it, both the houses, and signed into law by the governor also.
You know, and I was shocked to find that when you were Secretary of State, your efforts to make sure that you were a legal alien, there was an Attorney General's opinion going back to Frank Kelly.
Yes.
And he kind of handcuffed you with that, didn't he?
Well, I asked for an opinion because I couldn't believe, as Secretary of State, that we had to give out driver's licenses to known illegal aliens. And we did get that Attorney General's opinion. And you know, he was probably right. It did require, excuse me, really a legislative initiative to change the state law. But we could not get the either the state Senate or the state House to pass it. And so many people said, it really is a federal issue. There should be uniformity at the federal level. And so I said if I got a chance to go to Congress, that would be something that I would work on. And so I was one of the principal authors, actually, of the portion of the Real ID Act that dealt with driver's licenses because of the experiences that I had had as a Secretary of State. And again, you know, before we're Secretaries of States or state senators or members of Congress or what have you, we are all Americans first. And I think the vast majority of Americans, as we look at the very thorny issue of how we deal with illegal immigration into this country, we all agree that we must protect our borders first. We cannot have illegals literally using our freedoms against us. And a driver's license is a freedom, and it's a privilege, not a right. And we need to make sure that those documents are being given out to American citizens, or somebody who is here on a visa or a student visa. I mean, whatever the circumstances are, as long as they're in the country legally, and I know your state legislation did accommodate all of those particular nuances, then they can have a Michigan driver's license, because of photo identification, it's the foundation to your identity. It's how you get on an airplane, or how you rent an apartment, or open up a bank account, or what have you.
Yeah, Michigan was slow coming to the dance. They were slow coming to the party. They were one of the last half dozen states or so that were into compliance with this. What are some of the consequences for Michigan not being in compliance? You needed a passport simply to ride on an airplane? What else?
Well, if Michigan had not been in compliance and had not come along, you would not have been able to use your Michigan driver's license to get on an airplane or to use it really as a federal document. You would have had to have a passport. Now, I know we've also talked about an enhanced driver's license. I think that's part of your packages here as well. And that I, again, applaud you at the state level, because Michigan being a border state, as we are transiting across an international border here, for instance, to Canada, being able to utilize an enhanced driver's license as opposed to a passport will be a very important thing. And it's a great way, really, I think, for a partnership between the federal level and the various states, particularly those border states where people, I mean, we think about just going over to Windsor or Sarnia for breakfast, right, or go have dinner there. I mean, they really are our wonderful Canadian neighbors, and we're right here in this region. Commerce depends on it, so many various things, but again, we have to have secure borders.
And we share the Great Lakes with the Canadians, as well as other states in the Great Lakes region. Recently in Washington, you had the Great Lakes Day. Tell us a little bit about what was the need for that, and what are you doing to help secure our Great Lakes?
Well, as you might know, really, protection of the Great Lakes, our magnificent Great Lakes, has been a principal advocacy of mine through all of the various public offices that I had. My family are boaters. I actually was in the marina business before I ever got involved in politics. And but
you were involved in the Mackinac races.
Oh yes, that's true. I raced 29 of them. But you know, the Great Lakes, here we are living in, blessed to live in the Great Lakes state, but our Great Lakes are not only our identity, they're our economic impetus. There's so many various things. And so it is for all of us to protect them. And the Great Lakes Day is something we've initiated on Capitol Hill now. And we bring in speakers. I was a speaker last year with Richard Daley, who's the mayor of Chicago. And every year we try to have various speakers of people who are really involved in Great Lakes issues. And of course, we've looked at issues like water quality, the kinds of things that we can do to make sure our drinking water is pure. And we've looked at issues like invasive species. This is something I've worked very diligently on and hope to have the entire Congress pass this year, finally, after decades, long overdue, an invasive species, a piece of legislation which would require the salties, as we call them, the ocean-going freighters, to discharge their ballast out in the ocean before they come through the St. Lawrence Seaway into the Great Lakes, because that's manifested itself in zebra mussels or the round gobies, some of these various invasive fish, and in these different species. So many different issues with Great Lakes, and I think the Great Lakes will continue to be a huge issue as we go into the future, because they are literally 1/5 or 20% of the freshwater drinking supply of the entire planet. And again, if you look at the last century and the issue was probably oil, in this century I think it's going to be fresh water, and we are the proud stewards of all of this fresh water, but all of us have to work together to make sure we do pass it on to the next generation.
And you've also been a person advocating for the Great Lakes with regard to making sure our water is not siphoned off through water diversions to Arizona and some of the other states.
That's absolutely true. And this is, again, how when you talk about the Great Lakes Day, we really have formed together a Great Lakes consortium of the different members of Congress from the Great Lakes Basin, of all of the different states that are in the basin. And because you know what, there's strength in numbers, and unfortunately our region of the country, and Michigan is a great example of this, we have been losing congressional representation because not so much we're losing population, but we are not growing as fast as the very hot, dry, thirsty areas of the country like the Southwest and some of these other areas that are suffering drought. So we always have to be ever vigilant against any attempt to divert the Great Lakes. And you know, there's some of that actually that has gone on. I'll give you an example. In Chicago, quite a few years ago, they changed the flow of the Chicago River, really essentially for drinking water and for sanitary reasons, etc. But they flush all this Lake Michigan water to the tune of over 1 billion gallons each and every day down the Mississippi River, which is floating their barges or what have you. Maybe we didn't care when our water levels were very high, but now we are faced with historic low lake levels. And this is another issue I think that Congress needs to revisit.
What can be done?